真島建設シャカ
Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for not getting this one out in time. I caught a pretty nasty cough while working on the Metroid Dread video. Luckily not COVID, but it nevertheless delayed progress. Here we are anyway with what was supposed to be 2021's Yakuza video, and it's on Kiwami 2, a 2018 remake of the second game for the PS2 from 2008, much like how Kiwami 1 was a remake of the first Yakuza. I really should be looking at the older games before doing any of the others, but we've already started this series of videos with Kiwami 1, so may as well do the sequel too. Ryuga Kotoku Studio, developer of the Yakuza games, certainly put a lot on their plate around this time. Kiwami 2 got announced alongside Yakuza Like a Dragon, the 7th mainline game and the first one with turn-based RPG mechanics, and then there was Yakuza Online, which is a car game spin-off, on top of working on Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise. I'm gonna take a guess and say Judgment was probably thrown into the mix somewhere too, since that released some months after Kiwami 2, just in case they thought they weren't making enough of the damn games at once. With Kiwami 1 doing exceptionally well and Yakuza 0 doing even better the year prior, being praised by both critics and fans, it's safe to assume that Kiwami 2 was going to deliver the goods in the same fashion as those two games, while using the newer engine that got introduced in Yakuza 6 sometime after Kiwami 1 came out, but before Kiwami 2 did. Like the last two reviews for this series though, we'll quickly talk about what we're actually doing in the story while not going over too many late game stuff. Just a general idea of the things going on. We start off with a flashback showing a cop witnessing some shenanigans with the Yakuza and stopping a mother from jumping out of the window with her baby. Jesus, that's a way to begin your game. But now we come to present day, the following Christmas after Kiwami 1 in the year 2006. Once again, we take control of Kazuma Kiryu, now having adopted Haruka as his niece/daughter since the last game, with her referring to Kiryu as Uncle Kaz. At the end of Kiwami 1, or the original PS2 game, take your pick, Kiryu was revealed to be the 4th chairman of the Tojo clan, but decided to turn it down so that he could have a peaceful life with Haruka. Well, that certainly doesn't last very long because the 5th chairman, called Yukio Terada, asked Kiryu to help stop a war from happening between the Tojo clan and their rivals, the Omi Alliance, based in Osaka. Terada chooses to do this right as Kiryu and Haruka are paying respects to old friends from the first game, one of them being Haruka's mom. So could this not have waited until a little bit later? To make the timing worse, just as they're all talking about the Omi Alliance, a few of their members show up and shoot Terada. Though without giving too much away, bullets are kinda like needles in this game. They'll pinch a bit, but they won't kill you, just walk it off, you'll be fine. After having a tussle with the assassins, we return to Terada as he requests that Kiryu gives this peace treaty to the Omi Alliance's chairman, Jin Goda. This means that Haruka will have to stay at the Sunflower Orphanage, the same one Kiryu grew up in, until everything gets resolved. First things first though, with the Tojo clan having no chairman of their own, they'll need to find a new one, and Kiryu was sent by the acting chairwoman to locate her son, Daigo Dojima, who was actually close with Kiryu at one point. Daigo's found pretty quickly and nowadays has turned himself into a common thug, initially wanting nothing to do with the Tojo clan, but once Kiryu beats some sense into him, since that's the only answer for anything in Yakuza games, Daigo agrees to come along since his life got turned around for the worse by the Tojo clan anyway, so may as well settle the score. Could've saved us a fistfight if he came to that realization sooner, man. The two of them travel to Osaka in the fictitious town of Sotenbori, based on an actual Osaka district, Dotonbori. And you may also recognize this place from Yakuza 0 if you played that before this game or Yakuza 2. It's the same Sotenbori that Majima's plotline occurred. As a matter of fact, Kiryu goes to the club that Majima used to own, the Grand, to relax for a while, but even that can't be done without a scuffle because everybody in these games are a bunch of assholes. The one in charge of this particular posse of douchebags is Ryuji Goda, second patriarch of the Go-Ryu clan, and the son of Jin Goda, who we're supposed to be giving the treaty to. For now, Ryuji lets Kiryu go, but being a man who wants to take over Tokyo and become the Dragon of Japan, Kiryu should remain cautious, especially when a bomb goes off by the Go-Ryu clan shortly thereafter in the Millennium Tower, specifically where the Kazuma family office was. This is where we then get introduced to Osaka detective Kaoryu Sayama, who's given the task of taking Kiryu into protective custody so that things between the Tojo clan and the Omi Alliance don't go further south. Kiryu and Daigo then make their way to Omi Alliance headquarters, where they finally meet with Jin Goda and offer him the treaty. Negotiations are going pretty well at first, but Ryuji and his men storm right in before they can finish. Ryuji wants the war to continue and he'll make damn sure that it happens by any means necessary, taking away Jin on top of that. Kiryu plows his way through some of the Go-Ryu clan and makes it to Jin before he's fully captured, while also temporarily putting Ryuji in his place. But the cops break things up and Sayama cuffs Kiryu to act as a cover-up for her true intentions. There's more to her needing Kiryu's help than just for the case, however, as she also wants information from him about the Tojo clan so that she can find her missing parents. There are other plot elements involved too, like Detective Date looking into Ryuji Goda and the bombing that went off earlier. Kiryu speaks with the returning Goro Majima regarding assistance. Jin and Daigo find themselves truly captured this time. And Kiryu at one point heads into a castle that rises from the ground and not only holds samurais and ninjas, but 2 tigers that you have to fistfight with as well. It's so ridiculous yet so awesome at the same time. God, I love it when Yakuza gets weird. Being a remake of an older Yakuza game, there's not going to be quite as much happening in the story as something like Yakuza 0, but I think there's enough for Kiwami 2 to stand out on its own. Ryuji, for instance, while having simple motives, can be a pretty intimidating villain, beating someone up for calling him the Dragon of Kanzai, which he really hates, but still keeping a level head in a lot of other areas, even showing some sympathy near the end too. He tries to make friends with Kiryu at first, but that doesn't end up working, so instead he acts as a bitter rival to Kiryu throughout the course of the game. Just imagine Majima if his antics led to worse intentions, and that's Ryuji Goda in a nutshell. And talking to Majima, as much as I adored him in Kiwami 1 and 0, this is the game where I think he's at his best. Even after playing the other entries that take place later in the timeline. He's back to his goofy old self and now running a construction company carrying its own minigame, which I'll talk about later. Now, I didn't mind the more serious Majima that we had in 0. It was another side of him that we hadn't seen in prior games at the time, and his sense of humor was still there. But Majima is always going to be remembered for his crazy personality, and Kiwami 2 is where he really shines in my opinion. He's making a grand re-entrance at the Coliseum, smack-talking his lackeys for having no motivation to do construction work, despite all of them having 0 experience, and being totally blasé about disarming a bomb, relying on luck as to whether or not he cuts the right wire. This character is so good that he has his own damn theme song that never leaves my head even after turning the game off. Majima even has his own little side story exclusive to Kiwami 2 that you gradually unlock new chapters for as you complete the main game, though there's only about 3 of them, and altogether you can finish Majima's story in under 2 hours. If you were a big fan of playing as the Mad Dog of Shimano in Yakuza 0, then you may be a bit disappointed. This is all you get, and Majima's list of moves is no different than it was in 0 if you unlock the legendary style. Yes, there are extra targets you can go after to extend the runtime, but you don't earn experience while playing as Majima, and the only rewards you get are sellable items, where those or the funds you acquire can be sent to Kiryu. The campaign's overall a decent enough time if you want more action from Majima, and there are some cool parts in it, like getting to see Makoto again from Yakuza 0, but it's kinda shallow in the gameplay department and could have done with more fleshing out. The last character I want to talk about is Sayama because for some reason she never comes back in any other Yakuza title after this, and she plays a pretty big part in this game too. Her parents somehow got involved in an ongoing feud between the Tojo clan and Omi Alliance. She kicks ass in gameplay with Kiryu when the game partners you up with her, and while she's cold to Kiryu at first for being ex-Yakuza, over time and having moments alone together, she builds a romantic relationship with him. There's some decent chemistry between these two as well. They're both very serious about their jobs, but will occasionally let their guard down to open up to each other, showing how they're secretly big softies that simply care about others. It's very cute, but why the hell is Sayama only in the second game and nowhere else? She does make a brief appearance at the beginning of Yakuza 3, but she's off to work in America by then, so any chance of her coming back in another title is pretty low. Did players heavily dislike her? Was she not badass enough compared to Kiryu? Were we simply not allowed a female lead because people to this day still harp on about that shit? I just don't get why Sayama got removed from the series after the second Yakuza. She's an interesting character, and the poor girl has so much going wrong with her in this story. It's one bad thing after another, and it carries on throughout the whole game. I won't give away what actually does occur, but by the end I was like, oh my god, give her a break, why don't you? I want to see Sayama come back and beat up more miscreants with Kiryu is the general consensus here. Am I alone on this? Please tell me I'm not alone on this. Ah well, now let's go over the gameplay of Kiwami 2, and I'm pleased to say that after the first Kiwami game in Yakuza 0, things are still pretty fun and are even more simple than they used to be.
for better or worse. What I mean by that is that even though the combat is just as fluid as the other games, remake or otherwise, where you have light and heavy attacks as well as heat actions to inflict massive damage onto enemies, they completely removed the style mechanic from Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 1. This has been the case since Yakuza 6, granted, but the different fighting styles were such a cool feature to have in Yakuza games, and they really spiced up enemy encounters. Why take them out? I am aware that all Yakuza games prior to 0 play pretty much like this, which I'm sure I'll mention in those videos too, but it's such a baffling decision to me that they came up with something so monumental to the series, and then totally scrapped it so that Kiwami 2 plays more like the previous games. That just seems like we're going backwards in evolution here, and right now the only time we do get the styles back are in the Judgment games, not Yakuza. Even the heat actions don't feel as grand as they usually do. They still pack a punch, don't get me wrong, and again, I know a lot of them are from Yakuza 6, but they're not quite as creative as before, since a lot of the objects you use with them often play the same animations. For example, in Kiwami 1 and 0, you could use a boiling kettle to burn somebody with hot water, or a bowling ball to knock over enemies like pins. In Kiwami 2, you just use them to whack the enemy's face a few times, and that's it. Not nearly as enthralling, I'd argue. I suppose since I've mentioned Yakuza 6 a few times now, I should talk about the newer engine that was made for that game and Kiwami 2, as well as all current Yakuza and Judgment titles at this time. There's definitely more going for it in regards to the overworld and characters, looking more detailed and beautiful than ever, but as you've likely noticed by now, the frame rate got reduced from 60 to 30. This is for the PS4 version I'm using, to be fair, though sadly running it on PS5s doesn't give the performance any added oomph. But this isn't a problem at all if you play the game on PCs and you have the right specs. The PS4 version is definitely playable, and the frame rate never bothered my experience with the game personally, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't prefer the smoother frame rate from Kiwami 1 and 0, since I think when it comes to fighting games or brawlers in general, you need all the frames you can get to ensure that you time everything just right. This is all a nitpick on my end anyway, and I'm not gonna let it impact Kiwami 2 as a whole. Besides, they have fixed this for later games such as Like a Dragon and Lost Judgment, where everything's a lot smoother and crisper in the PS5 versions. The only thing that did take me out of the experience were a couple of moments where the camera was far away from a cutscene for some reason, but it fixed itself once the scene was over. With that tangent aside, engaging in fisticuffs with bad guys on the streets or the many hideouts you once again traverse through is just as cathartic as it usually is in a Yakuza game. And while the styles may be gone, you can at least unlock Extreme Heat Mode that drains all of your heat, but drastically increases attack damage and provides exclusive heat actions. It's an amazing ability that demolishes everybody's health even on harder bosses. The fights against the Amon brothers were much easier to win this time because of Extreme Heat Mode, compared to when I fought the Amons in Yakuza 0, except for the second brother because he cheats by using a goddamn machine gun. If there's one thing I absolutely love doing in Kiwami 2 and Yakuza 6 to some extent, is taking the fights inside another building. Starting outside and then luring thugs into a convenience store or something where I can then shove their faces into a microwave or throw them into a restaurant and completely shatter the glass has gotta be one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in a video game. You do get in trouble for it and the staff choose not to serve you, but it's worth it. I do this whenever I can and I never get tired of it. It's simultaneously hilarious and cool to pull off. Can't say I'm the biggest fan of the way the experience system works this time around, however, since it's split into different categories and you need a certain amount of each to unlock more abilities. You'll be able to purchase plenty of them as the game goes on, but certain categories are rather difficult to get experience for even after completing sub-stories and such, so grinding or playing on New Game Plus might be necessary to obtain absolutely everything. It's not a deal breaker in the end, but it isn't my favorite way to become stronger at all. Putting that aside anyway, the world of Kamurocho and Sotenbori also offer plenty to do as per usual, including new sub-stories, gambling, spending time with Haruka by fattening her up, Mahjong which I can never get a grip on, and Club Sega holding more classic Sega arcade games. This time we've got Cyber Troopers Virtual On and Virtua Fighter 2. Wait, we're in 2006, could they not have chosen a later game? By this time we had Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution and the first iteration of Virtua Fighter 5. Why go with a second title? I mean, it's a fine enough entry, but I would not choose to go back to this game in the series if I had the option. Everyone's super floaty like they're on the moon, and attacking has a bit of a delay to it, such as hitting your opponent while they're on the ground. I know how to pull the moves off, but the game takes a second or two to respond. It also gets pretty hard after beating a couple of opponents, but that's not surprising at all, being a game that suckers in quarters like a vacuum cleaner. To conclude this mini review of Virtua Fighter 2, it hasn't aged as well as later games have. I'm gonna instead play some darts with sound effects that I never realized Persona 5 Royal would later steal. And now I'll go back to the pissing minigame where the more I let out, the more I can blow up this woman's dress until she's in nothing but a bikini.
Game, the hell's wrong with you?
Sadly, there isn't quite as much to do in Kiwami 2 as in Yakuza 0 or even Kiwami 1. For example, there's no Skeletrix racing or dialing the phones to some girls, which isn't a big deal if they're gone, but they were nice distractions, not in that way. However, like in Yakuza 0, there are two particular minigames that are arguably the most important ones to do. The first one is the return of the Cabaret Club Sunshine from 0, now called 4Shine, with Kiryu being the new manager and having to go up against another batch of competitors that wish to close the club down. The minigame itself, I'm not even joking, is the exact same one that was in Yakuza 0. Like, there's literally no difference whatsoever. You again pick which hostesses are coming to work for the evening, taking into account their moods, levels, and the types of customers they have to engage with based on their riches. Then you have to place each hostess with different customers depending on their tastes and help them occasionally when they ask for it, whilst making sure their stamina is good enough. At the end of the shift, you calculate your profits, gain levels for your girls, and earn more fans until you're ready to face your rivals, speeding up the process by going out into Sotenbori and paying for partnerships with certain companies. In between shifts, your platinum hostesses will wish to talk to you privately and open up to you more, eventually leading to another sub-story that you do need to complete in order to fight the super bosses, the Amon brothers, by finishing every sub-story the game offers. Thankfully, the Cabaret side quest I think takes slightly less time to see to the end now than it did in 0, but it'll still take up a lot of your time if you're hoping to do absolutely everything in Kiwami 2. I can't imagine doing this side quest right after completing the one in Yakuza 0. If I wasn't doing it for a review, I would have suffered from so much burnout at that point and I probably wouldn't have bothered. Like I said, there are no changes to the Cabaret minigame whatsoever, so I really can't add more to it than I already did in the Yakuza 0 video. And it sucks that I've captured so much footage for it and there's barely anything to talk about. You don't even get a cool reward like in 0, it's just bragging rights, the most painful of accomplishments. That does, however, nicely segue into the Majima Construction minigame, or Clan Creator as it's titled, which in my opinion is a fair bit better. Majima and members of the Shimano family are putting together a project called Kamurocho Hills, but more Yakuza wish to ruin it all because there's money involved or something. I honestly don't really care because it's the same routine, just like the Cabaret Club or even the realty stuff from 0. You have 5 separate storylines where each member of this gang challenges Majima Construction one by one, and beating them changes their minds as they join your team. Now for the actual minigame, simply put, it's tower defense. You choose which of your employees with their own unique assets will join your squad to take down waves upon waves of enemies, with the occasional boss thrown in, while trying not to let them destroy your property. If it all goes up in smoke, you automatically lose and have to start over. Even if you only know the very basics of tower defense, you should be able to clear this no problem, especially with people like Doctor who comes packed with a freaking rocket launcher, just to be extra sure that you do end up in hospital. At any point, as long as you have the funds, you can individually heal up your party at the push of a button, or use any abilities the first 3 members in your lineup carry, like hurting enemies within a certain amount of space, or restoring everybody's health by a little bit, though there are cooldown periods once these abilities are activated. There are numerous missions to go through, whether it's for the main storyline or something to do on the side, with every one of them rewarding you with money and, well, Majima Construction rewards that are used to level up your crew and make them stronger and more resilient. That money, as well as whatever else you got, can also be spent on gathering more employees, or improving durability on your property so that they don't break as easily by enemies. Clan Creator is moderately more interesting to me than the 4Shine side quest, but it still gets pretty repetitive after a while, and once I was done with it, I didn't really think to go back unless I wanted to tackle the rest of the side missions. Yeah, I think that covers basically everything for Yakuza Kiwami 2. Again, it's kind of annoying that I've got all of this footage and I don't have as much to say about it as I did with 0, but there really isn't a lot else to say. Kiwami 2 was filled with all of that same Yakuza greatness from before, and I can only guess this is better than the PS2 version of Yakuza 2. I actually haven't played that yet. I really should one day. Some things are lesser this time around, and in case you couldn't tell by now, I'd overall say Kiwami 1 and 0 were better games, but Kiwami 2 also has great moments, either during the plot or during the sub-stories. That zaniness Yakuza's famous for is still here, and I can strongly recommend this entry in the series, once you're done with Kiwami 1 and 0. Try it out when you get the chance and see what you think.
I get the feeling that with each passing game from here onwards, we're gonna have less and less to talk about, with some exceptions such as Like a Dragon and Judgment, but we've got a long while before we're there. For next Christmas, we're gonna do Yakuza 3 and 4, going back a generation this time, but still continuing with the main storyline, and yes, there is a reason I'm tackling both games at once. I've got a lot of reviews planned for 2022, and I think some of you might have an idea as to what the next one is before we carry on with Fire Emblem and the Fates titles. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. It's Shin Megami Tensei 5, by the way. I don't think I made that clear. Oh, okay. Bye, then. Luckily, not COVID, but here we are anyway with what was supposed to be Here we are anyway with what was supposed to be Yakuza... Here we are anyway with what was supposed to be We're gonna have less and less to talk about, with some exceptions such as like a